Bismillah, الرحمن الرحيم. We are working now on a project named Abu Maria al-Iraqi, and he is a media manager for the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant. At the time, we did not know who are these leaders. And I remember that anything that the Islamic State tried to publish online was there was such a campaign just to rip it off of the internet as quickly as it would come up. So I had to start quickly tracking all of this material and copying it to an archive so that I could retain these materials. So I do have a great archive of the media works of Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. I have their execution videos, I have their debate magazines, I have all of their pictures and their development projects. I have tons and tons of writings from leaders. You know, at any time the leaders Al-Adnani and Al-Zarqawi, if they need, and al-Baghdadi need to say something, I need to have this information. I need this. So this was important to me, and it's only all of this time later that I am learning that there is a 24-year-old man named Abu Maria al-Iraqi, and he was a big media manager for the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant. So Allahu Akbar. And today, because we are not finished with this writing this project, today we have a different work. It's a paper I wrote in 2015, and this one, it was not in particularly focused on Syria, but it was more like standing in Syria focused outward. So this is what I will read to you today. Bismillah, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In fact, our hearts are seated with the love of mercy which Allah put there, and our sentiments of mercy are verifiably unbounding from origin, and extend furthermore from now. In the word that would be said millions of times every day, having such significance, there is not enough capture of the meaning of the word in the life of this world. The word merciful. Mercy is the vocabulary word that tries to describe one specific item, which most explanations of the word mercy have failed to let show in distinction. Mercy. Mercy is the vocabulary word to tell that the person has been granted, sparing you from struggle, sparing you from suffering, sparing you from pain, which you would otherwise fully inherit. The history of the manner with which persons develop is shown in a very simple geometry, which when repeating at any differing sets of material organization might let a pattern start with seemingly more complexity than would be actually represented. And I will show you, as I am going to explain this in the video. So we are talking about a problem. It looks like a very sophisticated and complex thing. So this is like the problem. You are seeing this pattern, and you are thinking, okay, so this is what I see in the world. This is what I see from this problem. But when you unwrap the problem, you will find that it's not just a small crescent moon, it's very sophisticated, but in the start of it, in its core, in its foundation, it's very simple in its foundation. It's so simple. It's 1 2 1 2 in the foundation. But when you see it across time, it looks a lot more complex. And so this is the person. You are seeing this complexity. But truly, all of this, it just came from something small inside the person. So, such as, one illustration of this formula is with the two-dimensional example of a piece of paper, which you will fold any number of times upon itself along the edges of the folded page to cut hearts, squares, circles, triangles, or any other shape that you are able to induce at the side of the page. And to unfold the page, you will see, which is a directly basic shape, unfolds to quite a sophisticated design, and which seems that it itself represented the furthest extent of its meaning. But we know, since we ourselves had folded the page, and we put more simple shapes than what we have caused to appear, that this unfolded representation is not the furthest extent and base of meaning. One further illustration of this formula is with the three-dimensional example of chemistry. It has been found that chemistry is the orderly explanation of all of the automatic interactions of the natural world, which is arranged not alone in the manner of the elements of the periodic table, where the exact management of the difference between items is the size of the nucleus, and the size will start at the size named size number 1 and proceed numerically in whole numbers. It is accompanied by the precise revelation that the elements join or repel one another, and if they should attach, there would be specific manners of approach and conjunction. Especially, there would be angles at which they would join, or otherwise not permitted, they would fail to join, and this is explicitly and directly the cause of the size. The three-dimensional example of the illustration of the formula in the orderly explanation of chemistry proves that the simple manner of the angle for which the elements or parts of the elements join with other elements, or the failure to permit any joining except the explicitly preferred angle, is of such magnitude of power that it solely retains massively the responsibility for the exquisite array of differences in chemicals at every single layer of its influence and complexity. Chemistry is an orderly study of power, which is separated by physics as an orderly study of power only for the purpose of chemistry to explain the angles of joining, whereas physics is to explain the particles themselves, which may eventually participate at an area of influence. This history of the manner in which persons develop could lay in any measure and interval across the vast settings of land, and let to the naked eye and its talents alone try to tell of how complex it appears that the developments of the persons had become. While this is not the accurate calculation of the items to be perceived, the pattern which any person in the original faculties of perception is able to calculate with will be in the vocabulary of civilization as a measurement, because it is what has been taught and made pervasively popular without exception. Civilization tries to tell the properties of that item to be on behalf of the supreme interest and motivation for sharing of persons between each other to support the cause of building. Thus, civilization is the vocabulary for the intention of persons to develop by sharing developments amongst each other, and therefore directly with the expectation that further development would result. The description of civilization has been taken up in causes by those who appear to exhibit the right of way, but instead what has been uncovered in the simple fact of geometry is the cause that it is not the cause of civilization, despite that this cause is going about in the apparel of some direct interest in gaining motives for civilization. All the while, it is entirely marauding and false. Of the most prevailing causes which has been marauded in the guise of a cause for the purpose of compelling civilization is trade. Trade is a vocabulary word that belongs to the explanation of an economy via marketplaces who envision themselves connected either directly or indirectly. The connecting piece for the marketplaces to see themselves as economy. It is regularly a physical currency, which actually is the synonym for money. Whilst the arguments and excuses in the name of the cause trade purported so long a time its integrity with the purpose of civilization, never was it so. From the beginning of time, trade had the outward appearance of sensibility in the exchange of the fruits of labor strength, where by the assumption of the sharing of items by agreements of its worth and wantedness seemed to supply the inhabitants of an area with materials for sustenance, building, and developments. Never was it so. The trade has never represented the cause of civilization. It has represented only the scruples of men whose cause is to entertain their personal well-being and take gain. Trade is not suitable for speech of the name of the cause, which is that of supreme interest and motivation for sharing of persons between each other to support the cause of building. Once you note that the simple shape of the item named trade is different and without symmetry to the item named civilization, then the chaos of the array in the design propagated all over the settings of politicalness and economics and the landscapes of human being will be like you simply folded the single page together on its former creases and find that what lays in your palm is the direct alignment of only a few directly simple geometrics, which are limited in their geometry by the edges of that folded page. To look at the directly simple geometry found enfolded in the arranging landscapes of politicalness and in economics, the cause should be searched in its original form, and the original form of the politicalness and economics in trade is not civilization. What we see now in the chaos which ensued upon the planet is the fruit of world's market, where any market is actually a center of power inherited directly from labor strength. The world market is a brokerage, and that brokerage is done in the name trade. At origins of world market is the works in the name of the cause empire. The properties of the world market, which is active circa 2015, is a breed of the empire of the British. That history will arguably the most revealing of the issues in the world market, circa 2015, in confrontation and chaos of the planet. The property of the British Empire, which must explain the properties of the world market via trade, is the first crease unfolded. The British Empire did not trade in the name of the cause which would eventually unfold an explanation of the world market, for explicitly directly in the purpose of which would eventually unfold an explanation directly for the purpose of stabilization of power. The British Empire did not trade in the name of the cause which would eventually unfold in the explanation of the world market 2015 for explicitly directly the purpose of stabilization of power. Why? Why should the stabilization of power be the purpose that with all efforts in trade expansion has been sought, and which goes forth eventually in the name of the cause world market? It is for the reason that trade does not whatsoever represent civilization, and that is the reason why when The explanations are given to us to tell us how trade is able to support the cause of civilization and to improve civilization. We are left so terribly confused and unable to resolve the difference.